Right, we're going to completely change tack and we're going to be talking about England's T20 series, in particular against India coming up, in the company of the analyst Freddie Wilde.
High over the fence, 6, takes him to 50.
High class.
He has stroked his way to one of the best hundreds you will ever see. High wide and answer. You bowl seam up to England, you disappear out the ground.
That'll do nicely to finish it. You can keep the ball in the crowd with all on it back.
Game, set, match and series, India.
Now, Nasser and myself have been joined by Freddie Wilde. Now, Freddie is an analyst who's worked with the Melbourne Renegades, the Oval Invincibles, and numerous IPL teams. He's been a consultant for them. How are you, Freddie?
Yeah, good, thanks, and thanks for having me on.
Right, let's have a look at what England have coming up. So they have a T20 series. That's the important one because it's all about preparation for the T20 World Cup. 5 T20 matches, all at the same ground. Let's have a look at the squad that they've picked. They've gone full strength pretty much. How do you see it, Nasser?
Yeah, they have got full strength, and why wouldn't you? There's a World T20 coming up in October. It's the same venues, obviously, and also you're playing against India, who are one of the favourites. What better practice could you ask for that group of cricketers? They are the #1 ranked side in World T20. They're a fabulous white ball side, well led by Owen Morgan. And as we've discussed with Ashley Giles, why shouldn't Owen Morgan get his best side in T20 cricket when there's a World Cup round the corner?
They're all talking, Freddie, about this is one of the rare occasions they get a full-strength squad to pick from. Are there any omissions for you? Anyone that's missing out on that could be in that?
Well, probably not, but I suppose the one area that I have a little bit of a question mark around is the spin depth. They've obviously got Rashid as the frontline spinner and Moeen Ali as that second spinner. It's a little bit curious that they haven't got another option, particularly with it obviously being in India. But I think that actually speaks to the fact that maybe England don't feel like they've got that many options outside the squad. Liam Dawson is one name who's been in and around their white ball groups recently, but I think he's coming back from an injury. So perhaps come the World Cup later this year, Dawson will be that third spinner. But that's the only area for me. Otherwise, yeah, I completely agree. England have obviously got a really strong side and it should be a cracking series.
Now, you're putting Nasser and myself under pressure because we come up with lots of hunches, lots of theories in all our punditry, and you sort of can crunch the numbers to back us up or actually deflate us in our opinions. But one of the things that most pundits will speak about is the fact that T20 is about bowling, that you can have all the batsmen in the world, but actually what you really need is a decent bowling lineup. How do you see it?
Yeah, well, this is a theory that's sort of gained quite a lot of traction in the last few years, particularly because when T20 started, it was all about the batting and everyone was focused on the big hitters. But I think as it's grown, people have begun to recognise you need to have a good bowling attack. And that's partly just a simple consequence of the fact that bowlers have got to bowl 24 deliveries. And if you've got a weak bowler bowling 24 balls, that could cost a side. So, it's a growing theory that you need a strong bowling attack to be successful. I suppose it's quite obvious in some respects. But I think one thing that I come back to, I think teams who have strong bowling attacks are often very consistent. That's the key word. Whereas if you've got a strong batting lineup, you can sometimes blow teams out of the water. I'm thinking RCB, they sort of scored 240, 250, but they can also sometimes be bowled out very cheaply. So it's I wouldn't sort of say that bowling sides are definitely more successful than batting sides, but I think generally they're slightly more consistent.
How do you sum up then that England are the #1 side in the world and actually their batting is probably their strongest suit? What, is England an anomaly there or is there something we're missing?
Well, no, I think their batting is exceptionally strong, very, very strong, to the point to which they're almost, they're probably one of the best white ball batting sides of all time, to the point to which they're actually managing to be consistent with the bat. But they've also still got some good bowlers. I mean, Jofra Archer is perhaps alongside Jasprit Bumrah the best T20 pace bowler, and Adil Rashid is a really good spin bowler. So you've got two parts there of a good attack. And they've got also what they've got as well is quite good defensive bowlers. Chris Jordan, Tom Curran are guys who generally favour death bowling skills. In England, playing in high-scoring games, that kind of bowling is often quite well suited. So England have sort of managed to build a side that I think works for their strengths at the moment. But yeah, it goes without saying their batting is their strongest suit. And their bowling, 6 months out or so from the World Cup, is the thing that they're going to try and work out how to just piece it all together, I think.
Well, as you saw there, the batting was right up the top. Let's see where their bowlers actually rate, not just the individual bowlers, but them as a team. But we'll see, actually, they're right down the bottom. Now, is a little bit of that. I mean, in England, we generally play on smaller grounds. I mean, certainly compared to somewhere like Australia, and belting wickets. Is that a reflection of that, or is it actually there's work to do in the bowling?
It's a bit of both, I think. I certainly think the fact that England play on good batting tracks is a product of why their economy rate is also really high. And, often teams are chasing big scores. They've got to go hard against England. But also it is a consequence of their personnel. I think their batting, they've got a huge amount of depth in that area, whereas in the bowling, there are a few more question marks. So it's a combination of the two factors. And I guess it's my job as an analyst sometimes to try and pick through exactly what it all means.
And where are we with power play bowling? I heard some stats last year that you need to get 3 wickets in that power play. If you get 3 wickets, you go on and win 80% of your games. Does that stat still hold? And where are England in power play bowling?
Yeah, that stat does still hold in that power play wickets are really important. The earlier you take wickets, generally, the more significant they are for the bowling side. It knocks runs off the batting team's total if you can get those early inroads. And it's something that England haven't been very good at, as this graphic shows here. They've got the worst economy rate, I think the second worst strike rate, and that's producing the highest average runs per wicket. So they're really struggling to make early breakthroughs and, in fact, keep a lid on the scoring rate. So when we're talking about England's bowling being something they need to work on ahead of the World Cup, I think it's most specifically their power play bowling. And really interestingly, that's actually come about after David Willey left the side. Now, Willey is someone who's actually a bit of a forgotten hero, I think, of the 2016 side that got to the World Cup final. Willey is a classical power play swing bowler. He left arm as well, which offers some value, pitches the ball up, attacks the stumps and takes early wickets. And he was really effective for England in that World Cup. Since then, I think he played a few games in the years after that tournament, but he's now been moved out of the side and England are struggling to replace him. They've got a number of options in and around the group that they're looking at. Mark Wood is one bowler there who, as that graphic shows, has a really good strike rate in the phase. That's important, taking those early wickets, but he's not managed to combine that with a low economy rate. And then another name as well that I think they've earmarked as a power play bowler is Sam Curran. Now, in some respects, Sam Curran was the sort of perfect heir apparent to David Willey, right? He was a left armer, someone who swings the ball, albeit largely in red ball cricket. He's not quite done it so well in white ball cricket. Also, he's a useful batsman. So I think they saw Sam Curran and they thought the sort of changing of the guard, if you like, and moved on from David Willey. Now, Curran hasn't quite managed to replicate the success of Willey. You can see he's the other end of that chart. England, I think, will be desperate for Sam Curran to try and fulfil that role because also he balances the side really nicely at number 7 with his batting. I think that Sam Curran and Moeen Ali at the moment are the 2 players vying for that spot on number 7. And yeah, if Sam Curran can start to contribute with the ball, particularly in the power play, I think that'll go a long way to him earning that spot.
Nasser, how do you see England's left armers? Who have they got? They can have a look at Reece Topley or Sam Curran. Which one would you go with?
It's a very good question. I think you'd probably have to go with Sam Curran first, but Reece Topley has got that extra bit of pace. Since coming back from injury, we saw him at the Ageas Bowl against Ireland. I thought he'd put on a yard of pace. And we're going to come on to Kohli in a short while and the stats against Kohli against left armers. And you might need the extra pace from Reece Topley. But Sam Curran had a brilliant IPL, outstanding IPL. He can bat in any position, really. So I would probably start with Sam Curran, but Topley is definitely an option.
Freddie, I always think, though, as well, because they get in those sort of crucial positions with the bat, that number 7 position. Who would you have? I'm going to give you a choice. You can have Sam Curran. Forget about the bowling. That's irrelevant. But just for that finishing, to walk out at number 7, needing 10 and over, needing 6 and over to win the game on a bad pitch that's spinning, who would you choose, Moeen Ali or Sam Curran?
It's a good question. I'd choose Moeen Ali at the moment. I think he's got more T20 pedigree. I mean, Moeen is someone who, in years gone by could get into T20 sides for his batting alone. I mean, we've seen him play some phenomenal innings in the Blast and he's played some useful knocks in the IPL as well. He's a particularly good hitter of spin bowling. But there is a little bit of a sense that perhaps Moeen is yesterday's man and Curran is sort of the coming man. As you said, Curran had an excellent IPL last year for Chennai. MS Dhoni spoke really highly of him and how valuable he is to their setup, which is obviously high praise. So, we're at that point where it's a sort of critical juncture for both those two guys. And yeah, I guess the next sort of 6 months or so will go a long way to England working out who exactly it is that slots in. Although it should be said as well, it might be just something that they change according to conditions. If it is a spinning pitch, or if the side England are playing have got a lot of left-handers, which will match up well with Mo in Ali's off-spin, they might go with Mo. But then if it isn't, they might go with Sam Kerr, and it could be sort of a flexible match-up spot for England.
Keezy makes an important point about that number 7, because we can be, as commentators, cliche-driven. The latest cliche is, what are you worried about your number 7 and number 8? The stats tell you they only bat 6 balls, so why are you worried about how much they bat? But I was listening to your excellent podcast last night, and it's not just, I'm not joking, it was excellent, Keezy.
It's not just I mean, seriously, it's like Freddie's only come here so you can tell your excellent podcast. It's pathetic.
So it's not that they only bat 6 or 7 deliveries, it's the confidence it gives that top order. And that's what's great about this England side. They bat so deep with Moeen, with Curran, with Jordan, with Archer, that the top order know they can go hard and they can still recover. Would you say that's the modern trend as well? Try and pack your batting?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's about trying to sort of interpret the numbers in the right way. And yes, number 7 doesn't often face that many balls, and you don't really want him to be facing that many balls, and number 8 and number 9. But, if you've got Chris Jordan at number 9, for example, you're going to be more confident than if you've got Yuzvendra Chahal at number 9, for example, because Jordan is someone who can, if required, clear the ropes. It's sort of about creating the sense or the illusion of batting depth in the minds of the batsmen, so that they feel like they can go and play aggressively. And that's definitely been key to England's strategy. And I think it's why England have been able to be so consistent as a white ball side and a white ball batting side, because they know they've got huge depth, and it's given them the confidence. And credit to Owen Morgan and Trevor Bayliss before for instilling that approach in the side, I think.
Nasser, see, I've been in teams, and we used the analyst a lot. He was really good, the Kent analyst at the time, especially as well with T20. I always think they come into the fore a lot more in this format. But it's a real balance. Like earlier, you were saying about if you lose 3 wickets in the power play, you lose 80% of the games. Now, I remember hearing that as a player and as a captain, and our coach saying these are the stats. So what you're really saying is the number 5, or whoever it is going in, when you're 2 down, those 2 batsmen, it's like, oh my God, we can't lose another wicket here because the stats say we're going to end up losing, or the chances are we do. But then you want them to play with freedom, play without fear. How do you get that balance? How would you get that balance as a captain or coach with your players?
Yeah, it was like Keith Fletcher used to say to us in Sunday League, right? Go out there, it's 10 and over, get 10 and over, but don't take any risk. It's like, how am I supposed to do that? But I think where England are very lucky, Rob, don't worry about what I would do as a captain. What they're very lucky with is Owen Morgan. Owen Morgan is this unbelievable balance between gut feel and instinct, and letting players go out there and express themselves, but also someone who does rely heavily on stats. I mean, he's a gambler, he's a punter, he'll read form. So he's a real blend of gut feel, play with your instinct, no fear cricket, but also the stats are used and guided by them. So I think that's why this England white ball side has gone exponentially so quickly through their batting, is because they don't, you're saying stats are for prats. They do bear that in mind a little bit. Sorry about that, Freddie. They do bear that in mind a little bit, but they do use them.
I think as well, it's about who you tell the stat to, right? So that stat about losing wickets or taking wickets in the power play, if you tell that to your bowling team, your bowling group, that's something to encourage them to attack, right? We're saying go and take 3 wickets. Now, for the batting group, I think England will probably quite often refer to stats such as how many boundaries they've hit. That's a key positive stat, framing it in a positive way. If you hit more boundaries than the other team, you'll win 75% of games. There are stats like that too. So obviously it's about, I think, the messaging and telling them to the right players in a way that encourages them to go and play. And Morgan, you're right, Nas, has been big on that, actually using data to back up a gut feel, to make players go and be bold and take the aggressive option, I think.
Important point you make there, Freddie. And Joss Butler has been speaking about it recently, about the boundary count. Up until a few months ago, Joss would look at the run rate and say, crikey, it's getting up to 10 and over and I've used up X amount of dot balls, the old-fashioned way, if you like. He's saying, actually, he's now thinking, I've got 6 overs left. How many boundaries do I need to hit? And it doesn't matter if he's used up 2 overs, he can catch up very quickly. He's learned that from the IPL a bit.
Yeah, and that's actually something as well that I think ties into matchups, which is a word that gets spoken about loads at the moment. And that's that Buttler is essentially saying, I'm happy to absorb some pressure against, the opposition's best bowler. I'm happy to let the run rate get out of control a little bit. I'm not going to try and keep up with the run rate all the way along. But then once he's absorbed pressure against, the Mitchell Starc or the best bowler of the bowling attack, he's then going to take on his matchup, whoever it may be, and then try and have a big over. And that's generally the modern way. And it's something that the West Indies started really in the 2012, 2014, 2016 T20 World Cups. They were renowned for facing a lot of dot balls, but hitting a lot of boundaries. And it was actually more calculated than just sort of brainless hitting. They were selecting their moment, choosing their bowler, and then taking him down. I think, really interesting that Buttler, who's a phenomenal player, is still developing his game and looking to get better, which, I suppose is a warning to all the other sides around the world.
Now, so Jason Roy struggled. I think I saw a stat from Benedict that he's averaged 12 since the World Cup. So that's not in T20 cricket. That's in all cricket, white ball for England. How long do you give Jason Roy?
I give him a while because I think he's a rhythm player. So the COVID has really hit his rhythm, obviously, the breaks in playing the game of cricket. He's also had fitness issues. He's been injured. So there have been more breaks there. Owen Morgan is someone that can have 6 months off and then just turn up and hit every ball out of the ground. Jason Roy is someone who needs to keep batting, get into the rhythm of batting. So I would give him possibly all 5 games and get him into the rhythm of batting. The problem for Jason is that he's been found out against spin to a degree. He's an anomaly. When he gets in, he absolutely belts spin, as we saw against Australia in the World Cup at Edgbaston. He smashed it everywhere. But in T20 at the top of the order, they've started with spin against him. Quick spin, Badri in the last World T20 final in Kolkata, bowling straight and targeting those stumps. But generally, people who spin it away from the bat, and that's where he struggled.
Right, Freddie. When I was a captain, our analysts used to give me all the stats. I say, don't give me all the stats, give me the ones that are important. And when you look at this series coming up, I'm the captain, Nasser's the coach. We're going to say to you, right, Virat Kohli, one of their key players, how do we get him out? How do we go about bowling at Virat Kohli?
Yeah, you're giving me the easy questions, Keezy. Well, I think one of the things you start with, and when you're analysing any players, you start looking at the types of bowling that they struggle against or succeed against. We were just talking about Jason Roy there, struggling against the ball, turning away from the bat. Now with Virat, if you look at his T20 numbers in the last few years, left arm pace, struggling against left arm pace emerges as something that is as a trend there. You can see here the numbers. He's averaging 18.4 against left arm quicks, and obviously against all of the other bowler types, he's really dominant, particularly slow left arm spin. England will be thankful they haven't got one of those in their squad at the moment. So left arm pace is the thing, and then you start thinking, all right, well, how's he getting out to left arm pace? And actually, this is something that is apparent across all formats. He's been struggling particularly against the short ball. It was something New Zealand exploited quite well a couple of years ago in a test series. Other bowlers, Trent Boult, I think, has had success, Mohammed Amir. So you start looking at short balls. So left armers is one thing, short balls is another. Now, we spoke briefly about England's left arm quicks. They've got Sam Curran and they've got Reece Topley. Now, whether Sam Curran is quick enough to challenge Virat with the short ball, I don't know. But maybe it's the angle across Virat that's causing him issues. Topley maybe has a bit more speed. Topley also is a swinger of the ball. So these are things that England will then talk about. You look at these numbers and you identify a potential weakness. The next point, I suppose, is do England actually have the bowlers who can potentially exploit it in this series? And that's a question as well, where you start bringing in technique and speed and all those kind of factors to work out whether Curran or Topley can do what Trent Boult, Mohammed Amir, as we're seeing here in this footage, have done to Kohli.
Come on then, Freddie. What would you say, though, is the pace you need to be? What's the minimum from the stats that you would need to be?
Well, yeah, I mean, looking at the bowlers who have got him out, there is actually a decent range of speeds. You don't have to be quick. I mean, obviously, if you're going to rush someone on the short ball, it's helpful to have some ball speed. But Sheldon Cottrell is one bowler who's had, I think he's got Kohli out 3 or maybe even 4 times in the last couple of years in T20 cricket. Now, Cottrell isn't rapid. He's someone who gets the ball to move early on. So that's when maybe, I was talking about England's power play wicket taking, Sam Curran pitching the ball up also might have an effect from a left arm angle. So there is evidence to suggest that it doesn't necessarily have to be high pace. Obviously, it helps, but yeah, potential chink in the armour for England to exploit in this series.
Freddie, we're seeing with all this how important it is to stay ahead of the curve, ahead of that trend. We saw in the World T20 that England won in the Caribbean, the use of the slow ball bouncer almost surprised everyone. Bumble just called it a long op, but it was a long op that worked and won England that World Cup. What is the trend? If you were advising Owen Morgan and you want to be ahead of the curve, what's the trend for the next World Cup, in your opinion, statistically?
Well, one thing we're seeing, and people have spoken a lot about how spin bowling has become more and more effective in T20 cricket. Now, the rise of spin has seen a specific type of rise of batsmen in the middle overs who deal with spin really well. An example, actually, who we might see in this series is Shreyas Iyer. He's a really good player of spin. He bats at number 4 for India. However, these players who are good against spin quite often are players who struggle against high pace. And as a result, we've begun to see, this is not me necessarily claiming I'm ahead of the curve, because I think we're seeing this happen already, but we're seeing high-paced bowlers be used in the middle overs. So whereas previously there'd be a lot of spin in that phase, and there still is, and so that's why teams are packing their batting with good players of spin in that period, there are also now beginning to be some really fast bowlers come through. Lockie Ferguson's one who stands out as probably being the best at it. In analytics, we generally call these guys enforcers, guys who bang the ball in, bowl hard lengths and very fast. They're the kind of players now who I think are having quite a lot of success in that middle over phase. So in the World Cup, I'd look out for that. You've got Nortje, the South African, Rabada's another one who can do it well. As I said, Lockie Ferguson, Riley Meredith. I actually think Mark Wood could fulfil that role for England quite well. And if he fulfills that role, then it means England can have more overs for Jofra in the power play and at the death. So, high-paced bowlers through the middle overs is a trend that I would look out for in the coming months.
Really, when we saw the lead up to the 50-over World Cup and we just saw teams, we're talking about, is someone going to get 500? The batting's just out of this world. Then we got to the World Cup and tournament play, knockout play, all of that type of stuff, the pressure on them. It was nothing like that. In fact, it was the opposite. Are we going to see the same in the T20 World Cup in India?
Well, possibly. One thing that's worth talking about with regards to these tournaments is in bilateral cricket, you don't often have sides. This T20 series is a rare example. You don't often have teams at their absolute full strength. And so when you do have that, quite often it's related to bowlers. Bowlers rest and rotate out of series in between World Cups. But when it comes to tournaments themselves, people have their strongest bowling attacks. And that's why I think that sometimes we see scores deflate a little bit in the tournaments themselves, because suddenly there's no weak links in the attacks. Everyone's got their best bowlers. Everyone's got their fastest bowlers fit, firing and raring to go. So I think we may see bowlers fight back. But that said, India's been a fantastic place to bat in T20 cricket over the last few years. They've got really good pitches that are true, tiny boundaries. So I'm sure we'll still see some really high scores.
And do you guys ever put into account, last question this is, do you ever put into account emotion, form, confidence, those types of things that can have such a swing on a player's performance? Or are you just looking at the numbers?
Yeah, of course, I think you've got to take into account those things. It would be silly not to. It's a game played by humans, ultimately, not computers. I'm an analyst and I do use the numbers to strongly inform the sort of suggestions that I'll make. But it's all about a conversation between the coach, the captain, the analyst and the players. And you've got to feed all of these different things into the melting pot. I'm not blind to the fact that players sometimes will suffer crisis of form. It doesn't mean that they've suddenly become a bad player. You've got to try and bring all of these different factors into the equation, put the information on the table and have a good, honest back and forth chat with the coach, the captain, and ultimately try and make what you think is the most informed decision that helps the team win, really. That's as simple as that.
Freddie, thank you so much. It's been brilliant. I also say it's been fantastic having you on our WhatsApp group, because we've been just badgering you for all the stats and it's been absolutely fantastic. Nasser, as ever, thank you very much. And I will see you tomorrow, because it is T20 cricket. That series begins. India versus England, the two best teams in the world in that format, 12:30 Sky Sports Cricket. And then we have the Hussain and Key Cricket Show Thursday, March the 25th. So that's 2 Thursdays away from now. 6 p.m. That is Sky Sports Cricket. Until then, goodbye.